Court will now reconvene. Defense Attorney Christoph Gavin, would you please take the stand? Now then, if you would, Mr. Payne.
Yes, Your Honor. Well, Mr. The witness state his name and occupation?
Is this farce necessary, Your Honor? Believe me, far stranger things have gone on in this courtroom. Fine, I'll play along. First, there's one thing we need to have made clear. How did you know about the secret beneath the victim's hat? By secret, I'm guessing he means the fact that Mr. Smith was bald. Forgive my curiosity, but what is it about this fellow's head? Your Honor seems to have an inordinate interest in it. I wouldn't call it inordinate, Mr. Gavin.
Mr. Wright!
What do you think you're doing, Wright? Wow, things sure look different from the other side. You know what I mean, Apollo? Speaking of looking from the other side, let's consider something for a second. The victim wore that hat all night, never ever taking it off once, except for the one time. That one time being the instant he was hit. Oh! When Mr. Wright returned to reporting the crime, the hat was lying on the floor. Mr. Wright picked it up and placed it on the victim's head. In other words, in order to have seen Mr. Smith's bald head, you would have had to be at the scene of the crime at the time of the crime. In other words, you would have to be the real killer. Is that what you're trying to say? Not bad, Apollo. Mr. Gavin? I'm afraid I haven't been entirely honest with the court.
What?
Oh, I assure you, I had the noblest of intentions. I did it all to protect my client, Mr. Wright. Yet, I'm afraid in the current situation, I see little reason to hide anything. Very well, allow me to tell you the truth of what happened that night. Finally, you may begin your testimony. Tell us, how were you involved in the events of this fateful night? The rage I sensed in that man that night troubled me, so I returned to the club. I went down to the basement and peeked in through the little window in the hideout. It must have been right after the murder took place. The victim was dead, as he appeared in the photo. A bald head, an unconscious girl, and Wright holding a bottle in his hand. I sensed that it was not the best place for me to be at the time, so I left. That's when the call came from Wright.
So, you witnessed the murder?
For better or worse, I missed the actual moment of the deed.
Mr. Gavin, may I remind you that you are on Mr. Wright's defense team? Your testimony is clearly disadvantageous to your client.
Well, what else could I say? I'm standing on the witness stand, after all. So you are, Mr. Gavin. And you had to testify as you just did. You had to tell them you saw the scene of the crime through the little window. Mr. Wright? You had to say that, because that was the only probable window of opportunity. Right, Apollo? Oh, Mr. Wright, the defense should do the cross-examination, not the defendant. Mr. Justice, are you prepared? Yes, Your Honor. I can't believe I'm going up against Mr. Gavin. This trial is getting weirder and weirder. The rage I sensed in that man that night troubled me, so I returned to the club. That man! You mean Mr. Smith? He was different from the other customers. His aura, shall we say. I knew he was a serious poker player, but it was more than that.
So you knew the truth nature of your client's job?
Of course. But I also knew he wasn't engaged in gambling, which would be illegal. Well, it makes sense that he'd know. They were friends, after all. Worried for my friend, I returned to the club. You see, I feared this Mr. Smith might be someone coming to settle an old score. I see. What happened then? I went down to the basement and peeked in through the little window in the hideout. The little window? You mean the one used to keep watch up at the stairs? Yes, a relic of an ancient past. The Black Marketeers used it, I believe. And why did you go through the trouble of peeking in through the window? Wouldn't it have been easier to just open the door and go into the room? I didn't want to upset Wright, you see. Upset Mr. Wright? Yes, one of my fears have been unfounded. I'd be walking in on their match. Bad form, to say the least. Huh. So far, everything you're saying makes sense. It must have been right after the murder took place. How did you know it was right after the murder? Really, no need to shout, Justice. I was just getting to that part of my testimony. Ah, there he is. The coolest defense in the West we know and love. Even when you're standing up on the witness stand, some things never change. I was afraid you changed too, right? But you haven't. You and that overbearing personality of yours. With friends like these, who needs enemies? The victim was dead, as he appeared in the photo. By photo, you mean the second photograph in the crime scene? Precisely. You see, he wasn't wearing his hat then. I saw his head when he was dead. And then Mr. Wright came along and replaced his hat? Can you describe the scene of the crime for us? A bald head, an unconscious girl, and Wright holding a bottle in his hand. Those were the only three at the scene of the crime? Yes, as far as I saw at least. Then we're back where we started. The killer was the defendant, Phoenix Wright. Who else could it have been? But why didn't you talk to the police? 2 reasons. First, I didn't actually witness the very moment of the crime. Second, my office was asked to defend Wright. Even after seeing what I had seen, I couldn't abandon my friend. There must have been someone else there at the moment of the crime. Justice, I just said I saw no one. Not a soul. But that goes against what Mr. Wright said. Yes, this mysterious 4th person. Who would conveniently be the real killer, I suppose. Glad to see we agree, Mr. Gavin. Let me pose a question, then. Tell me, what possible reason did the real killer have to swap cards in the victim's hand? Perhaps you can show us a reason why such a thing would be necessary? How can I show something I can't find myself? Remember, Paulo, the card that was swapped out was the 5th ace. The 5th ace. Right. Well, Mr. Justice, the question of why the killer would swap out the card had been raised. Can you point to a reason? Look at that 5th ace. This is the card. With that drop of blood. A single drop of blood marks the front of the card. And it's red. It's now or never. The defense would like to present evidence to the court. Evidence showing the reason why a card was swapped out. And go ahead, point out your reason, Mr. Justice. Why did the killer take the 5th ace? Because it was bloody. My reason is this. Is that an ace? Why? It's got blood on it. Right next to the spade. What? This is insane. Why wasn't this told about this? Why? Could this be the missing 5th ace? Inconceivable. How could you? What are you doing with that card? Well, that's the thing. Why is Mr. Gavin so upset? It's just a fishy card from some fishy girl. Oh, that card. It's mine. That is, I picked it up at the Borscht Bowl Club that night after the murder had occurred. I gave it to my daughter. The cards are her stock in trade, after all. No! Impossible! Unacceptable! The court can't accept this evidence. It's a fraud. A fraud? How can you be so sure? What? I think the only person who could claim it was a fraud would be the one who took the real card from the crime scene. The real killer. Allow me to elaborate. What if this trace of blood was the reason? The reason for the killer to take... For the reason to take... Yeah, for the killer to take the car from the scene of the crime. Where are you going with this? Take another look at the photo and the victim's head. At the moment of the crime, his hat fell on the floor, and a trickle of blood ran from his forehead down the back of his head. Couldn't a drop of that blood have fallen on one of the cards? I suppose so. The killer then took the card to hide the blood. Regardless, that evidence is non-permissible. Oh. But right, regardless of how you wasted the last 7 years, you used to be a lawyer. You know what a serious crime it is to conceal evidence. Oh, we can discuss the finer points of our legal system later. What's important now is that I've answered your question. What are you talking about? You wanted to know why the killer would have taken a card from this crime scene. And now, I've told you. One drop of blood would have been decisive evidence, you see. This is baseless conjecture. Baseless! Oh, I assure you it's quite based. What? It's amazing, really, how a single drop of blood in a single card can lead us to the truth. It's quite simple. Well, Apollo? Yes? Try picturing the scene of the crime. In your head. The murder took place in the hideout. The body of the luckless victim was found on the poker table. And before the killer swapped a card out, there was a single card with a drop of blood on it in the victim's hand. Given this, there was one decisive problem with the scene. What is it? This be simple, shall we? Given that there was a drop of blood on the card, whose position in the diagram doesn't fit? The victims, the killers, the witnesses, the second witnesses? Whose position doesn't fit the bloody card? Well, if given the cards are here, the second witness shouldn't be there. The second witness's position is the problem. The second witness's... That would be Mr. Gavin, right? The second witness's position is far less problematic than yours right now, Justice. Or perhaps perilous is a better word. Oh, I'm so tired. I cannot see what the blood-stained card has to do with the second witness's location. I'm afraid you're more than in peril of a penalty this time. Your Honor, one more chance, please. I suppose. Do think it over, Mr. Justice. Okay. Well, I guess it would be the victims? Is it the victim's position that's the problem? I don't follow your logic here, Mr. Justice. Well, look, the victim was struck in the head, sending him back into his chair. You'd think any blood would fall behind the body, not under the table in front of him. Take a look at the photo again. If he bled in this position, the blood would fall on the floor, not the cards. Why, that's right. So, what does this mean? Incidentally, we were sitting in swivel chairs. Swivel chairs? Oh, man. Apollo, try turning the chair around. Okay. The chair was facing the other way? It would have to be. So we have to assume that at the time of the murder, the victim's chair was facing away from the table. When Mr. Wright returned from informing the police, which way was the chair facing? When I came back to the room, the body was facing as seen in the photo. That would mean the killer turned the chair back around. Let's take the next step. Look at the diagram once more. We know the victim was facing away from the table at the time of the murder. But this creates another significant contradiction. Again? Let's test your reasoning skills again, shall we? Apollo, whose location on this diagram contradicts our new understanding of the crime? The victims, the killers, the witnesses, the second witnesses. Whose location creates a new... Well... The killer. The victim was struck from the front, correct? Indeed. Well, wouldn't it be hard for the killer to hit him from the front? Sitting where his indicator currently is? I think it'd be quite hard, yes. Yes, but what you're saying makes no sense! Why would the victim suddenly turn to face the wall? In the middle of a game? I believe a sufficient reason will soon come to light. What? There's something in this diagram that makes far less sense, actually. Look again at the diagram. Apollo, if the victim was struck when he was sitting as shown here, where is the assailant be standing? Try marking it on the diagram. What? But there's no room to put a mark where the killer should be. Don't worry. Let's think it through and see what we find. We know the victim was facing towards the wall at the time of the crime. It's the only thing we know for sure. Try to forget about everything else. Where would the killer have to be standing to strike our victim? To kill them from the front, technically they'd have to be here. The killer had to be standing, well, here! You get points for flair, but that's all you get. I thought it was onto something there, too. Only thing you need to point out, that staying there would be impossible. The victim is facing a solid cupboard. Or are you claiming the killer climbed the cupboard and hit him from above? It's simple logic, really. If this is the only place the killer could have been standing, then that means that at the very moment of the crime... Wait, I know! At the moment of the crime, the cupboard wasn't there. What was this now? I mean, that's the only explanation, right, Mr. Gavin? He has been awfully silent. Your Honor, I have a suggestion for the defense. We should arrange to examine the cupboard of the hideout immediately. Bailiff, send a team to the crime scene immediately. I'm trying to move the cupboard. Your Honor. What? There's one more thing your men should look for. Please give this to the bailiff. Huh? Yes. I see. You do belong in the courtroom, after all, Mr. Wright. I do my best. Let's forge ahead here while we wait. Look at the diagram once again. It's been changed. If the killer was standing here at the time of the crime, then this cupboard wasn't here. Which means... Apollo, try moving the cupboard. Okay. Thank you. As you can see, the cupboard was the problem. At the time of the murder, it has to have been shown as here. Now everything is in place to reconstruct the moment of the crime. Oh my! What's this? What is it now? Look at the diagram of the crime scene once more. It appears we found yet another contradiction. What I believe to be the final contradiction, in fact. What? Oh dang. Notice something, Apollo? Our line of deduction is rapidly approaching its logical conclusion. Now then, Mr. Justice, please point to the new contradicting indicator. The victim, the killer, the witness, or the second witness? Which indicator contradicts what we know about the crime? Well, given all this in the red spot, you couldn't see it. About this cupboard. Are we all okay with assuming it was moved? Sure, why not? Well, if it was, something really doesn't fit. The cupboard would completely cover up the window to the stairs! Oh! That's right, someone standing outside wouldn't be able to see in. Someone like Mr. Gavin! What did you say? Oh, is the coolest defense of the West losing his cool? Don't expect me to play along with your little game, right? It's only a game until someone gets killed, Mr. Gavin. And someone was, while the window of that room was blocked by a cupboard. So, Mr. Gavin, perhaps you'd like to explain to the court exactly where did you witness the crime scene from? Excuse me, Your Honor. Order. This is a court of law and I will have order. We just received word from our investigative team in the Borch Bowl Club. They've examined the cupboard of the hideout, Your Honor. Oh, what do they find? Well, Your Honor, turns out there's a secret passage behind it. What? Yes, I believe I mentioned something of the sort before. This is one of the tricks to the room many of our regulars know about. I do remember him saying something about that now that he mentions it. Secret passage is a handy thing to have when you're engaged in illegal going-ons. You never know when you might need to duck away from the eyes of the law. So the room is a secret passage. Where's it go? The other side connects to the restaurant above. The underworld bosses could get away from the cops and enjoy a cold bowl of borscht, no doubt. Just like our killer. You see where our line of simple deductive reasoning has led us, Apollo? I see it, but I don't believe it. This girl wasn't kidding when she said I needed this trump card for the last hand. At the time of the murder, the window was blocked and the victim's hat was only off his head for a few minutes between Mr. Smith's murder and Mr. Wright's return from calling the cops. In other words, the only place anyone could have seen the victim's bald head was from inside the hideout. Well, Mr. Gavin? Come on, say something. Dare I ask what really happened that night? Actually, I think we can probably figure it out ourselves at this point. That night, for whatever reason, our killer had a date with Mr. Smith. A date with destiny. There he crouched, hidden in the secret passageway behind the cupboard, holding his breath, waiting for just the right moment. Then the chance came, and he took it. Ah! Ah! What did you do that? Wait here, I'll get help. Miss Olga really was out cold, struck by Mr. Smith. But his time was soon to come. Mr. Wright went upstairs to call the cops, leaving Mr. Shoddy Smith alone in the hideout with the unconscious dealer. Then our killer stepped out from the secret passageway into the hideout. The victim must have heard the cupboard sliding aside. He wheeled his chair around to look, and after the deed was done, the criminal must have seen the blood on the card. He would have, of course, realized the need to destroy the evidence. The single spot of blood told the whole story to the crime. Too bad for him he didn't linger any longer in the hideout that night. If he had, he might have noticed the cards on the floor. And the fact that they were all red. Well, it seems this trial has taken yet another turn. I'm truly sorry I had to see this day come, Mr. Gavin. Mr. Gavin? Mr. Payne! Yes, Your Honor. Prosecution will continue the investigation. As Mr. Phoenix Wright, the defendant is hereby cleared of all suspicion. What? Believe me when I say that I don't believe this is happening, Mr. Gavin. But I'm afraid the circumstances call for me to issue a warrant for your arrest immediately. Objection! Oh, no need to apologize. I'd rather enjoy myself. It's not every day you get to witness a legendary attorney's dirty tactics firsthand. Your point, Mr. Gavin? Frankly, Your Honor, I'm shocked. And a person of your caliber would be taken in by such a low-grade parlor trick. Excuse me? The defendant is cleared of all suspicion. This is hardly the time for jokes, Your Honor. Mr. Wright hasn't proven anyone's guilt or innocence here. What he has done is use illegal evidence to put the blame on someone else. And not just anyone else, but me, his own defense attorney. Illegal evidence? Objection! Let me ask you, Mr. Gavin, is there still any reason at present to suspect me of wrongdoing? Of course. This bottle, for instance. The bottle of grape juice Mr. Wright was drinking. How do you intend to explain away the fingerprints on the murder weapon? And not just any fingerprints. Am I right, Mr. Payne? Actually, yeah. The fingerprints of the bottle were upside down. I seem to recall this being an issue earlier. The court and this case demand an explanation. I can't think of only one reason why one would hold the bottle upside down. And that is to hit someone with the bottom of the bottle. Well, Your Honor. Ah, see how the caught fish squirms at the last. Well, Apollo? Yes? Your boss seems awfully concerned about this bottle still. But I'm sure you can come up with a suitable explanation. Just like that. Yeah. Just like what? Why would anyone grab a bottle upside down, other than to... Don't let him trick you into thinking his explanation is the only legitimate one. Is there really another? Take another look at the court record. I believe you'll find a simple answer there, in plain sight. How about you just use your answer in plain words? It would be hasty to deliver a verdict on unanswered questions, indeed. Well, Mr. Justice, Mr. Gavin said that the court in this case demanded an explanation. Don't worry, justice won't leave until justice is done. As the defense would care to enlighten the court, what evidence do you have to explain why the fingerprints in the bottle upside down? I can think of one right there. It's actually easier to show you than explain, Your Honor. Place that bottle on your floor, next to your chair. Excuse me? On the floor? Yeah. Now reach down and pick it up. Without getting out of your chair. Ah! See? You naturally go to pick up the bottle by its neck. With your fingers upside down! Look at this photograph taken the night of the murder. The defendant, Mr. Wright, sat here, playing piano, bottles of grape juice on the floor at the side of his piano bench. He would have naturally picked up the bottles upside down several times. Whoa! I can't believe it was that simple. Recall our dinner that evening, Christoph. I was drinking my usual juice then, too. Basically, you used the bottle on the table to do the deed. But then you must have remembered. So you went and picked up one of the bottles from under the piano, and you switched the bottles. You took one of Mr. Wright's bottles and made them look like the murder weapon! Order, order, order! What did it say to these charges, Mr. Gavin? Fascinating. So this is the legendary attorney's famed tactic of misdirection. What? You claim that I switched the bottles? Where is your proof? Proof? Well, that's, as I thought, more baseless conjecture. I'm afraid your bottle of proof is quite empty. Objection! I wouldn't be so sure about that. Your Honor, when you initiated the investigation of the hideout earlier, do you recall I requested an additional investigation? Yes. I have a memo about that here. Retrieve the bottles from under the piano with the Borscht Bowl Club. And here is one of the bottles in question. What, are you going to dust them for fingerprints too? I would be surprised if anything on that but his. Scout probably would have made such a novice mistake, true. The bottle won't bear a trace of anything. Say, Apollo. Yes? Why don't you go ahead and examine that bottle? But why? Just humor me. Mr. Wright. That bottle will solve the case once and for all. What? Some bottle. Grape juice. How long has it been since I drank grape juice? Apparently, it's Mr. Wright's favorite drink. I wonder how well it goes with borscht. Nope, nothing strange here. There's something inside the bottle. What's this? That card. It can't be. Recall that unpleasant woman's testimony for a moment? Miss Ogor, really? Yeah, a little swingling devochka. That night, I planted the card like I was supposed to. And Wright lost the last hand, just like he was supposed to. The Smith searched him. But the planted card was gone. The trap failed. Wait, this isn't... You're telling me that this is the planted card you disposed of? The one you mentioned in this piece of testimony? I happened to put my hand in my pocket and found a card. Yes, I snuck a peek at it and found it was a 5 of hearts. I had a feeling something might happen, so I disposed of the card. Before the game.
Disposed? Where?
There was an empty bottle of grape juice I had been drinking right beside me. I threw the card inside the bottle. The 5 of Hearts. This is the card. The bottles were swapped. And the only one who could have done that was the 4th person in the club that night. You, Mr. Kristoff Gavin! That's all. Is this your idea of revenge, Phoenix Wright?
Revenge?
Revenge for the events that took away your attorney's badge 7 years ago. My past is like my logic, straight and true. Nothing's changed. All I did was point the finger of justice in the proper direction. Fine. I'm glad we could have this little tete-a-tete, right? This is insane! What about me? I'm not gonna prosecute anyone! I believe this time we've finally come to the end of our trial. Mr. Payne, do you have a report for us on Kristoff Gavin? He's admitted everything. We're processing his arrest now. I see. Still, one has to wonder why he would do such a thing. He didn't even have a connection to the victim. Did he? None that we know of. Mr. Wright, have you anything to add? I'm afraid I can't shed any more light on the matter. About this victim, Mr. Shoddy Smith. His occupation was listed as traveler. An odd profession to be sure, but that's all we know of him. I'll arrange a follow-up investigation, Your Honor. Good. Mr. Wright? Yes? 7 years. You still haven't lost your touch. Kristoff Gavin was a man with much significance for me, both as a friend and a lawyer. He's extremely talented, to be sure. He needed two things before I needed two things before I could confront him. The first was a place where no injustice would be tolerated, this courtroom. The second was a man who would tolerate no injustice. In other words, a defense attorney. You, Apollo. Me? This is a dark time for our legal system. A twisting of justice brought on by our very own initial trial system. We have to set it right. Mr. Wright. Our work lies ahead of us. And I, for one, am looking forward to it. Well, it seems like a good time to announce the verdict. The court finds the defendant, Mr. Phoenix Wright, not guilty. Court is adjourned. Oh, we did it. Such a weird turn of events, that case. Thanks, Apollo. You came through, just like I thought you would. I'm pretty sure I didn't do a thing in there. It was you who cornered Mr. the killer. I couldn't have done it by myself. You sensed it too today, didn't you? Your ability. Ability? Yes, a sensitivity I lack. You'll come to understand it soon enough. Wait, I wonder if he means... I have one question for the witness then. You say you saw the moment the defendant hit the victim. Is this true? Of course it's true! It's a weird vibe I'm getting. What was that, Mr. Wright? You'll have to find the answer to that question yourself. The answer... Right. Today was full of questions without answers. Most of them about Mr. Gavin. What possible reason could he have to commit murder? Perhaps you'll learn that in the days to come. Huh? Wait, you don't know, do you? This locket is the key. Huh? Oh, that reminds me. I met the girl whose picture belongs in that locket. You're
daughter, right? That's right. She's my daughter. You know, you were right about this locket. Huh?
I took this off his neck the night he died. But it looks like our dear Russian scam artist saw me. So the truth is, this locket really did belong to him.
Wait, but that's perjury! You testified! You said the locket was yours! There's no such thing, actually. Huh? I merely said that it was a locket with my daughter's picture inside. A subtle distinction, but a distinction nonetheless. And it's the truth. Wait, but then, why? Why was the victim wearing a locket with a picture of your daughter inside it?
Sometimes the straightest path to the truth isn't the best one.
Give it time. You're still just getting started with your career.
Speaking of which, I may be out of a job. I work for Gavin Law Offices after all. I still can't believe I just saw Mr. Gavin get led away in handcuffs. Apollo? Yes? How about coming to work for me?
Huh? You mean at the Wright & Co. law offices? I mean, there's not a single attorney in my generation doesn't know it.
I can't imagine that to be true, but... Wait, didn't you... You're not a... Oh, I turned in my badge, yeah. I'm not an attorney anymore. That incident 7 years ago. Legendary trial. And at the middle of it all was one man. Phoenix Wright. The case reached a sad conclusion, and he left law for good. Have you ever thought about coming back to the courts? I am not qualified to stand in a court of law, I'm afraid. Did you notice in today's trial? There's a single piece of forged evidence.
Forged evidence? What are you talking about?
I'm talking about evidence that should not have existed. A naughty magician's trick. One piece of evidence struck me as odd as true. It just seemed, well, too perfect. I'll bet this was the forged evidence.
The card.
You mean this, don't you? I got this from your daughter,
Mr. Wright.
Yes, that card couldn't have been found at this crime scene. Why? Because the killer took it with him when he left, leaving the wrong card in its place. Luckily for us.
The court can't accept this evidence. It's a fraud.
A fraud? How can you be so sure? I would think the only person who could claim that it was a fraud would be the one who took the real card for the crime scene. The real killer.
My verdict was already handed down 7 years ago. Then you really... Yes, I forged this card. One look at the crime scene should have told you it wasn't real. But you can't do something like that and call yourself a lawyer?
Who's calling themselves an attorney, Apollo?
So it's true. The rumor is true. 7 years ago. None of that matters much now, does it?
I punched him.
Huh. It's your story from here on out, Apollo.
Perhaps I can help you turn the next page.
My office address.
Drop in if you like. Mr. Wright. Oh, about your uppercut? Try yelling and take that next time. I find it packs a little more punch.
Apollo, thanks for today.
I had a good time. With that, Mr. Wright walked out the door. And that's how my first trial ended. A lot of mysteries went unsolved. And at the time, I had no idea why they were all related. Every mystery that day, connected by a single thread of logic. I'd find that out soon enough. My name is Apollo Justice, attorney at law. And this is how my story begins. Up next, Turnabout Corner. Yes, please.
Alright, done our first case already.
Oh, they don't show little pictures.
That's fine. Alright.
This was Let's Play Ace Attorney, Apollo Justice. It's hard not to say Phoenix Wright or Miles Edgeworth Investigations. Yep. See you next time. I get to figure out what a turnabout corner means. Take care.